In this video, I'm going to show you how I airbrushed this eye completely freehand, not using a template or sketching it out. Let's get into it right now. Okay, so I have this reference image here, just a basic eye. So using a very light transparent grey. So this is made up of transparent base mixed with reducer and only a few drops of black. Now if you want a more detailed instruction on how to mix this as well as the darker tone, then jump in the description below. I'll have a link to that video showing you exactly how to do that. So essentially by using a light grey, it's going to be my sketch color. So as if I was utilizing a real light grey lead pencil and then gradually going darker. So this will allow me to sketch in my design and also refine it if need be. Okay, so now what I want to do is just find my starting point. Let's just say it's about here. And you can see how light that sprays out. I'm not too worried if the design varies a little bit. That's fine. I really just want to get a sense of showing you how I can do this freehand. Now the reason I like to use templates is a couple of reasons. Obviously we have a great relationship with Airshot Stencils and they supply us with a lot of the templates that you see here on this channel. So what I like to do is use those templates in a video artwork. So a tutorial showing people how to use that particular template. And what I find is that they can then purchase the template, follow along, and even if you're a complete beginner, you can at least do some airbrush artwork relatively easily. Whereas if you have to, draw it all out yourself, it just takes a lot more skill and practice. So you can see I'm looking at the white areas of the eye now. This has a little bit more area than on my reference. So you can see my reference here. It's a little bit less there than here. So this is all just mapping it in to start with, like I said, with this tone. And then I can refine it. I'm going to narrow that off by extending this shadow. Now a lot of people are against using templates, which look, I understand. When I started airbrushing, I was the same. I wanted to do everything freehand and I was like, nah, I'm not going to mask that at all. I'll just sit there for an extra 3 hours trying to get all those edges perfect. Which is fine if you want to do that. And there are artists that have the skill to do so and you can get it close. You're never going to get that complete definite edge by going freehand. There's always going to be the slightest little piece of overspray that, even when you're up like really close, you're still going to get that. And that's fine for a lot of artwork, but if you're trying to do photorealism, then some of those shadows need to be sharp. So for that purpose, a template's great. And I learnt this from Drew Blair. So master photorealist and great guy, fantastic airbrush artist. And he doesn't just use templates, he uses eraser pencils, he makes paper templates as well, like the way I've shown you how I do it. And to be honest with you, that's who I actually picked up a lot of that from. And his theory is, use whatever creates the best end result. And I totally agree with him on that. At the end of the day, a template is just a tool. Whether you need to use a bit of masking tape, you need to use an eraser pencil, or you need to use one of the freehand texture templates, it doesn't matter, it's just a tool. Whatever gives you the desired look is what you should go for. Now, I don't do a lot of photorealism, but even so, I just find that if you utilize templates and paper templates and masking, and even like I used to draw everything out on motorcycle tanks to get the design marked out, well now I can just cut my design straight from my reference image. I print that out to scale, and the beauty of that is you've got no markings on the paintwork of the motorcycle. So you're literally just using the paint from your airbrush and you can build your design from that. So it's a much better option, the customer's happier, and at the end of it, it looks great. You get a nice accurate image, and it's a lot quicker than trying to draw it on and worry about distorting it because you're working on a curved surface. But you know, I could talk a lot more about it, but in a nutshell, I think that whatever helps you get that really good end result is obviously the best method. Doesn't matter what you use. So now I'm just getting this thicker shadow in there. Just building that up. So you can see how I have to stop it here. So usually I'd use a paper template or some sort of template to, you know, protect that area there. So now I just have to work that in freehand and not go as heavy. So a lot more controls needed. Lock that in. So now to add a bit of texture in here, I'm going to deliberately spider this out a little bit, like that. And that's going to give me a more definite edge. So I'm pulling back on the trigger, it's over thinned. So you can do little tricks like this to build texture even without using a mask or a texture template. Again, nice and close to the edge. To make sure I get a nice crisp line. I'm going to fix all this up when I come in with the darker tone. You can see I've still got some overspray there, that's fine. Now just doing a bit more freehand to build texture. Got my key areas in. You see how thin that is, so just got to let that dry off. Get a few more of the lashes in. Again, like I said earlier, this is your sketching colour. Building up that shadow tone. Do some drop shadows on the eye as well. I can't really do that much more with this tone. It's mainly just to sketch it in. I will have to come in with some white highlights. See, if I did this on synthetic paper, for example, then I would do the Drew method where you scratch out the highlights so you don't need to use white paint. That way you're not worried about blue shift. And you can do that with an eraser pencil. You can even do it with a blade, depending on how sharp the highlight needs to be. Just dust around the eye a little bit, get a bit more tone, and now start to work in that sharper shadow. The crease of the lid. Now it's a kind of a funny shape, got a little bit of a curve from the reference, and then it cuts across fairly straight and curves back, sort of kicks up at the end and curves back and down. Dust that out. Blend that up. There's a shadow in here. Blend that up, and then can fog in the eyebrow. So whenever you're working completely freehand, you want to take note of the negative and the positive spaces. Kind of slowly build your artwork. Step back from it a lot to see that you're on the right track. Again, that's why you use a lighter tone. So feel free to definitely practice this. It will be more difficult, so even if you want to have a go using a paper template first, get the feel for doing this particular eye. You don't have to use this reference image. There's plenty of different ones on there. Just search black and white eye, even a color one, and then, you know, run it black and white. I think that's what this one is. It's actually a color reference. And now I'm going to put in some of those eyebrow hairs. Now you want to be all different directions, follow your reference, but don't be too uniformed. To make it more realistic, you don't want it super uniformed. You can see I'm leaving those gaps from the original shadow, and that's giving it the body, making it look a bit thicker, so it's not a completely thinned out looking eyebrow. Build a bit more movement in there, a few more of those hairs, and then I'll block in some more colour from a distance to get the shape a bit more accurate. And then a couple extra pieces there. And now I'll dust off this area a little bit. So you can see it's a little bit more adjusting. If I did this with a paper template, I would have got everything really accurate and nice and quickly, even if you used a projector and drew it on. Okay, so now I want to run with the transparent black. So this is pretty close to solid black, but again mixed up with transparent base, reducer, and black. Now if you're new to airbrushing, I'd probably recommend mixing up a mid-tone, so one slightly darker than this, but not as dark as the transparent black I'm about to use, just to make it easier to control. This is going to be a lot harder to control because it's obviously a very big step from this tone to the darker transparent black, so keep that in mind. So like I usually do with most of my artwork, start in the darkest spot to see how this colour will look. Now I want to be up nice and close to get a really sharp edge. And then tone it in. Spending a little bit more time allowing the paint to dry while I'm coating. I can also wind the MAC valve in to drop the pressure output, and this allows me to just build it up without the air blasting it out to either side, which, as I showed you earlier, is handy when you want to create some of this texture, but not so much when you want to get a nice defined edge. Now I'm just trying to make this look nice and round. Now keep in mind I'm working on a canvas, so this is not a smooth canvas. You can make it smooth. But that requires multiple coats and sanding. But because this isn't as smooth, it's going to seep a little bit on the edges, creating that little bit of overspray. Now I'll start off with this, darken all this in before I do my lashes. And if you're only just starting out with the airbrush or you want to learn more, we now have an online course available, airbrushasylum.thinkific.com, to check that out. I'll also pop a link in the description below for you. So I may actually crop along here a little bit more to make that a bit smaller. So again, you can adjust with this tone. Keep in mind now, you've got to be more accurate because this will be the final tone. So now, running this edge here, so again up nice and close. You can see I kind of sketch with the airbrush, moving along carefully to get that nice sharp edge, and then I'll blend out from there when I'm happy. So I'm not worried at the moment that that's a bit messy. I'll show you in a second how to fix that up. I'm just concentrating on that sharp edge. Getting a little bit of tip drying, but I'm going to persist. Not perfectly circular, but you get the idea. Try and clean it up a little bit. Okay, and now I'm going to blend out. So again, up close, I'm angling the airbrush in a little bit, and paint on, paint off. And you can see I'm still up pretty close. Still getting a bit of tip drying, so blast that out. And then further away. And want to taper this out. Other side. You see, I'm very cautious, alright, so going very, very carefully. Because I know this is the dark colour. Now, I'm going to bring in the shadow. Building up a gradation. And shade a little bit as well along here. Not as dark this time. Now I need to run a bit of this texture. You can vary the sharpness further away for softer textures. Again, it'll be a lot easier with a texture template, but still can be done. You want to be very cautious about this edge. That's that leading edge there, so you want to keep that nice and clear. Some finer dagger strokes in here as well, just to break it up. You can see adding that texture definitely makes it look better. But again, you want to be organic with it, not too uniform. Probably the hardest thing to do, because naturally you want to repeat the same stroke over and over. Continuing on with that texture. Again, deliberately spidering these out to build that texture. So you want to be up nice and close, pull back a lot on the trigger so that there's more paint than necessary. And that's going to come out and give you that textured look, which is quite effective. And I'm just bringing in my shadow. I'll do some finer texture in as well. So just moving really quickly with the airbrush. Now we'll start putting in some of these lashes. So the lashes essentially are just a dagger stroke. So thick to thin. Again, varying the thickness. This is where, you know, you just follow your reference, but putting some finer ones in there as well. Takes a bit of practice to master dagger strokes and even just fine lines. Just don't get disheartened. Now I'm going to block in this area here to build up more of that thicker shadow, which also gives the illusion that those eyelashes are a lot thicker, which is what we want. Make this a little bit more uneven. Cross over some of those lashes, look a bit more natural. Again, just dagger strokes, and thicken that up a little bit too. Need to run these lashes. So these are finer ones. So definitely more difficult to do. So we've got this imaginary edge here, so follow that. I'm just going to run a slight shadow right along here, just so that I can follow that edge and just stay on track. You can see I'm tip drying a little bit here, so I want to clean that up a little bit now. I'll run some more defined ones. Work over the top of some of the ones that are not as good. Some longer ones. Just building layers. And we need to continue some shading along here, just to pick up that edge that runs along that lower part of the eye. This gap along here is bothering me a little bit, so I'm going to come in and bring some of that texture up. Okay, so now I'm going to run a bit of a shadow along here. And just a slight one underneath. You can see that's enough underneath the eye there, so they're not as heavy. Come in and shape this area here. And now I'm going to render this shadow as well. Again, nice and close. Keep it controlled. Then it tapers off. And bring this down a little bit more. I just step back and have a look at the shape, and I think this could be tweaked a little bit. Bring another lash out like so. Shade that. And then just work that shadow down a little bit, like that. Bringing this shadow over. So it's a lot of painting a negative space to create a lighter positive space. So even though I will add some white highlights into this, you don't want to rely on that. You want to build as much of the shape and shadows of the artwork first before coming in with your white. You want it to look as 3D as possible. More dagger strokes within this eyebrow. It's the same as before, just thickening it up a little bit and getting those more defined ones in there. So I'll start with them first. And then I'll dust over to make it look thicker. So you can see right now that looks very thin, looks a bit unnatural. And tapers off, not as sharp on the taper. Something that I recommend you do, especially when you are attempting to do something freehand or completely freehand like this, step back from your artwork and analyze the shapes and shadows. And what you can do is you can squint your eyes, therefore blurring the artwork. And what this does, it'll cut out the detail, but it'll show you the shapes that you've airbrushed in and the shadows and how dark you are, whether or not you need to go darker or keep an area lighter. It's going to show you all of that by stepping back and squinting your eyes. It's really helpful, especially when painting more photorealistic images or portraits. It definitely comes in handy for that. Almost done, and then we'll come in with some white highlights. And just bring this shadow across a little bit, darken off that section. So now I'm going to add in some white highlights up nice and close. Try and stay away from the darker shadows. You don't want to contaminate them with the white. Put some in the white of the eye as well. Again, less is more. So I probably would have used less white had I used a template, like a paper template, but because it's completely freehand, this one, I've had to resort to using this white to pop out a few of the areas. Now I'm actually going to leave some negative space to create a reflection, which will give the illusion of the eyelashes reflecting on the iris. So I want to capture that within the highlight. Again, just carefully working that in, taking my time. Now I need some white highlights in here as well, just to add to the texture. You can see I'm doing a little bit and then coming back in and adding to it. Again, less is more, so just build it up as you go. You can always add more, it's a lot easier than trying to remove it. And I'll do just some real little highlights in here. Just to add a little bit more depth. And just some dot highlights to create some texture here. Be careful not to go over the eyelashes. Just texturing this up a little bit. Just to simulate the skin texture. So here's a completed canvas. See, the highlights have really made everything come to life. Close up of some of that texture. You can see there's only fine lines in the eyebrow highlight. So to continue your learning, be sure to check out some of the other videos and playlists that I've got listed here. And until next time, go grab your airbrush, do some amazing artwork yourself, and I'll see you again very, very soon in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.